Chapter 1. The silence in the Griffin mansion was deafening. For the first time in months, there was no gentle humming from the kitchen, no soft laughter echoing through the halls, no patient voice coaxing his twin daughters to try just one more bite. Nicholas Griffin stood in his empty foyer, a multimillionaire who had everything money could buy, yet felt like the poorest man alive. 3 days ago, he had yelled at the one person who had brought light back into his broken home. 3 days ago, Ariana Powell had walked out his front door in tears, and his 5-year-old daughters hadn't eaten a proper meal since. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked away the seconds with merciless precision, each sound echoing through rooms that once buzzed with warmth and life. Nicholas pressed his palms against his temples, trying to block out the memory of Ari's face when his harsh words had cut through her like a blade. The way her dark eyes had filled with tears she refused to let fall. The way her shoulders had straightened with wounded dignity before she'd quietly gathered her things and left without another word. Now, upstairs, he could hear the muffled sounds of his daughters crying again. Sadie and Sasha, his precious 5-year-old twins, had barely spoken since Ari disappeared from their lives. They pushed away every meal, asking repeatedly when Miss Ari was coming back. And Nicholas, the man who could close million-dollar deals with a single phone call, couldn't find the words to explain to his children why he had driven away the woman who had become their whole world. Have you ever said words you couldn't take back to someone who meant everything to you? Words that shattered not just their heart, but your entire world? Let me take you back to where this heartbreaking story began, 3 months earlier, when a man who thought he had everything discovered he had nothing at all without love. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and join our Dear Love Diaries family. Your special place in this community of heartfelt stories is waiting for you. These passionate journeys of souls connecting against all odds have brought together thousands of beautiful hearts just like yours. Make sure you hit the bell too, so you'll know immediately when a new story unfolds in our diary of love. Nicholas Griffin had interviewed 7 nannies in the past month, and each one had left his pristine home office feeling like they'd just survived a military interrogation. At 34, he'd built his tech empire through demanding perfection from everyone around him, and he saw no reason to lower his standards when it came to caring for his daughters. The children's schedule is non-negotiable, he was saying to the young woman sitting across from his mahogany desk, her hands folded primly in her lap. Breakfast at 7 sharp, educational activities until 10, outdoor time weather permitting, lunch at 12:30, quiet time, dinner at 6, bath at 7:15, and lights out by 8. No exceptions. The nanny candidate, a nervous 20-something with shifting eyes, nodded rapidly. Of course, Mr. Griffin. And about weekends? The schedule remains the same. Consistency is crucial for children who have already experienced disruption. His jaw tightened at the memory of his ex-wife Sarah's abandonment 6 months ago. She'd left one Tuesday morning with nothing but a note saying she couldn't handle the responsibility anymore, and a forwarding address in California. What about playdates? Birthday parties? Unnecessary distractions. My daughters have each other. Nicholas glanced at his watch. Do you have any other questions? The woman's smile faltered. Well, I was wondering about flexibility. Children sometimes need. Miss Henderson, let me be clear. Nicholas leaned forward, his gray eyes cold as winter steel. I'm not looking for someone who thinks they know better than I do how to raise my children. I'm looking for someone who follows instructions precisely. Can you do that? She gathered her purse with shaking hands. I think there might be a better fit for your family elsewhere, Mr. Griffin. Another one gone. Nicholas rubbed his temples as Miss Henderson hurried out of his office. His assistant's voice came through the intercom. Mr. Griffin? Your final interview is here. Send her in, he said wearily, not bothering to look up from the papers on his desk. He was already preparing his standard speech when the door opened, but something made him pause. The footsteps were different, confident but not aggressive, purposeful without being rushed. Mr. Griffin? The voice was warm honey over steel, and it made him raise his head. Standing in his doorway was a woman who immediately commanded attention without demanding it. Ariana Powell was beautiful in a way that seemed to glow from within, smooth brown skin that caught the afternoon light, intelligent dark eyes that missed nothing, and a smile that promised both kindness and strength. But it wasn't just her beauty that stopped him cold. It was the way she stood, straight-backed and serene, like someone who had weathered storms and emerged stronger. She wore a simple navy dress that suggested professionalism without severity, and her natural hair was pulled back in an elegant twist that emphasized her graceful neck. "Please, sit down," Nicholas managed, his usual commanding tone slightly off balance. Ari settled into the chair with fluid grace, her hands relaxed in her lap. "Thank you for considering me for this position, Mr. Griffin. I know finding the right caregiver for your daughters is incredibly important." There it was again, that voice. It wrapped around him like a warm blanket, making him forget for a moment that he was supposed to be conducting an intimidating interview. "Your references are impressive," he said, scanning her file to avoid looking directly at her. 10 years of experience, degree in early childhood education from Howard University, specialized training in childhood trauma recovery. "I believe children deserve caregivers who understand their world," Ari replied simply. "They're not small adults. They're complex little beings with big emotions and even bigger dreams." Nicholas's eyes snapped to hers. Most candidates tried to impress him with their qualifications or their willingness to follow rules. No one had ever talked about his daughter's dreams. "Tell me about your approach to discipline," he said, testing her. "I believe in natural consequences and gentle guidance. Children learn best when they feel safe and understood, not when they're afraid. And if they refuse to follow the schedule?" A small smile played at the corners of Ari's mouth. "Then I'd want to understand why. Is the child tired? Hungry? Overwhelmed? Sometimes what looks like defiance is really a child trying to communicate a need they don't have words for yet." Nicholas set down her file, leaning back in his chair. This woman was challenging everything he thought he wanted in a nanny, yet something about her responses intrigued him. "My daughters have been through a difficult time," he said carefully. "Their mother left 6 months ago. They need structure, not emotional analysis." Ari's expression softened, but her voice remained steady. "Children who've experienced abandonment need both structure and emotional support, Mr. Griffin. Structure gives them security, but emotional connection helps them heal." The word abandonment hit him like a physical blow. No one had dared use that word in his presence since Sarah left. Most people danced around the subject, offering empty platitudes about taking time apart or finding herself. But this woman had looked him straight in the eye and named the truth his daughters were living with. "You seem very confident in your opinions," he said, his tone sharper than intended. "I'm confident in my experience," Ari replied without flinching. "I've worked with many children who've lost a parent, either through death or abandonment. They have specific needs that go beyond schedules and rules." Nicholas studied her face, looking for signs of judgment or pity. He found neither. Instead, he saw something that unsettled him, genuine understanding, as if she knew exactly what his daughters were going through. "The position requires living in," he said. "The previous nanny quarters are fully furnished. The salary is generous, but I expect complete availability." "I understand. May I ask about time off?" "1 weekend per month, assuming there are no conflicts with the children's needs." Ari nodded thoughtfully. "And what about your role in the children's daily routine?" The question caught him off guard. "My role?" "Yes. Are you actively involved in their care, or do you prefer the nanny to handle everything independently?" Nicholas felt heat creep up his neck. The truth was, he'd been so buried in work since Sarah left that he barely saw Sadie and Sasha except for brief goodnight kisses. But admitting that to this composed woman felt impossible. "I'm very busy building my company," he said stiffly. That's why I need reliable help. Something flickered in Ari's eyes, not judgment, but a kind of gentle sadness that made his chest tighten. Children need their parents, Mr. Griffin. Especially children who've already lost one. No nanny can replace that connection. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Nicholas felt his jaw clench. Who was this woman to tell him how to parent his own children? Miss Powell, I think there may be some confusion about what this position entails. I'm not looking for parenting advice. I'm looking for someone to follow my instructions regarding my daughter's care. Ari stood gracefully, smoothing her dress. I understand completely, Mr. Griffin. But I should be clear about something too, I don't just follow instructions. I advocate for the children in my care. If that's not what you're looking for, then perhaps this isn't the right fit. She turned toward the door, and Nicholas felt panic spike through his chest. He'd scared away another candidate, but this one felt different. This one felt like she might actually be able to help his daughters in ways he couldn't even define. Wait, he called out, surprising himself. Ari turned back, one eyebrow raised in question. When could you start? A slow smile spread across her face, transforming her from merely beautiful to absolutely radiant. Tomorrow morning, if you'd like. 7 o'clock sharp, Nicholas said, trying to regain his authoritative tone. I'll be here at 6:30, Ari replied. I like to settle in and prepare before the children wake up. After she left, Nicholas sat in his office staring at the door she'd walked through. Something about Ariana Powell had gotten under his skin in a way he couldn't explain. She'd challenged him, stood up to him, and somehow made him feel off balance in his own home. But it was more than that. When she'd spoken about his daughter's dreams, when she'd looked at him with those knowing eyes, he'd felt something he hadn't experienced in months, hope. Maybe, just maybe, he'd finally found someone who could help heal his broken family. He had no idea that by tomorrow evening, he'd be questioning everything he thought he knew about love, loss, and the courage it takes to let someone into your heart. The next morning, Nicholas descended the stairs at exactly 6:45, expecting to find his new nanny waiting nervously in the foyer like all the others had. Instead, he heard something that stopped him cold, the sound of his daughters laughing. Real laughter. The kind they hadn't made since Sarah left. Following the sound, he found himself standing in the doorway of the kitchen, watching a scene that seemed to belong in someone else's life. Ariana stood at the counter, wearing jeans and a soft yellow sweater that made her skin glow like burnished gold. Her hair was in a loose ponytail, and she was flipping pancakes while dancing slightly to music playing softly from her phone. But it was his daughters who took his breath away. Sadie and Sasha sat at the breakfast bar on tall stools, both wearing their matching pink pajamas and messy-haired grins. They were giggling as Ari flipped a pancake high in the air, catching it perfectly in the pan. Do it again. Do it again. Sasha squealed, clapping her hands. Please, Miss Ari. Sadie added, bouncing in her seat. Okay, but this time, you two have to help me count. Ready? 1, 2, 3, the twins shouted in unison as the pancake soared through the air. Nicholas leaned against the doorframe, mesmerized. When was the last time he'd heard his daughters sound so carefree? When was the last time this kitchen had felt like a home instead of just a room where meals were served? Daddy! Sadie spotted him first, scrambling down from her stool to run over. Look! Miss Ari is making flying pancakes. Sasha was right behind her sister. And they're shaped like hearts. Look, Daddy, look! Nicholas knelt down as his daughters crashed into him, their small arms wrapping around his neck. Over their heads, his eyes met Ari's, and something electric passed between them. She was watching him with his daughters, and the soft expression on her face made his heart skip a beat. Good morning, Mr. Griffin, she said, her voice warm as melted butter. I hope you don't mind that I started breakfast a little early. The girls were awake and hungry. It's fine, he managed, though his world felt tilted on its axis. I didn't realize they knew how to be this happy in the morning. Ari's smile was gentle. Children are naturally joyful, Mr. Griffin. Sometimes they just need permission to show it. As if to prove her point, Sasha tugged on his tie. Daddy, Miss Ari says we can make pancakes shaped like butterflies tomorrow if we eat all our breakfast today. And she knows a song about pancakes. Sadie added. Sing it, Miss Ari. After we eat, Ari laughed, sliding heart-shaped pancakes onto small plates. Your daddy needs to get to work, and you two need to get ready for your day. Nicholas watched in amazement as his daughters, who usually picked at their food and complained about eating, devoured their breakfast while chattering excitedly to Ari about everything and nothing. She listened to every word like they were sharing the secrets of the universe, asking questions that made them light up even brighter. Miss Ari, Sadie said around a mouthful of pancake, do you have little girls too? The question was innocent, but Nicholas saw something flicker across Ari's face, a shadow of pain quickly hidden behind a smile. No, sweetheart, I don't. But I love taking care of special little girls like you and Sasha. Why don't you have babies? Sasha asked with 5-year-old directness. Sasha, that's not polite, Nicholas started to say, but Ari held up a gentle hand. It's okay. Sometimes grown-ups don't have babies, and that's perfectly normal. There are lots of different kinds of families. She deftly changed the subject, but Nicholas caught the way her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the syrup. There was a story there, pain carefully tucked away behind her professional warmth. Girls, finish up so Miss Ari can help you get dressed, Nicholas said, suddenly needing to escape the overwhelming domesticity of the scene. Will you read us a story tonight, Daddy? Sadie asked hopefully. The question pierced his heart. When was the last time he'd read to them? When was the last time he'd been home before their bedtime? I have a conference call with Tokyo, he said, hating himself for the disappointment that flickered across their faces. That's okay, Ari said softly. We'll save you a story for another night. But it wasn't okay, Nicholas realized as he grabbed his coffee and headed for his office. Nothing about his life was okay. He was failing his daughters in ways he was only beginning to understand, and it had taken a stranger, this beautiful, challenging woman, to show him just how much. I'd love to hear about a time when someone entered your life and changed everything. Share your story in the comments below. Throughout that first day, Nicholas found himself making excuses to walk past wherever Ari was with the girls. He told himself he was just checking on their progress, ensuring his new nanny was following protocols. But the truth was more complicated. He was fascinated by the way she moved through his house like she belonged there, bringing warmth to spaces that had felt cold for months. He watched from his office window as she took the girls into the garden, all 3 of them barefoot in the grass, looking for 4-leaf clovers. He listened to their voices drifting up from the playroom, where she was helping them build what sounded like an elaborate fort out of couch cushions. Most striking of all, he watched his daughters transform. Sadie, who had become clingy and fearful since Sarah left, was laughing as she chased butterflies. Sasha, who had developed a stutter when she was nervous, was chattering away without a trace of hesitation. She's good with them. Nicholas turned to find Dominic Morris, his business partner and closest friend, standing in his office doorway. Dom had stopped by to review quarterly projections, but like Nicholas, he seemed drawn to the window overlooking the garden. It's her first day, Nicholas said, as if that explained his inability to concentrate on the financial report spread across his desk. And you've looked out that window approximately 15 times in the past hour, Dom observed with a knowing smirk. She's beautiful. She's an employee. She's a woman who's got you more rattled than I've seen you since Sarah left. Nicholas turned away from the window, irritation flaring. Don't be ridiculous. I hired her to take care of my daughters, nothing more. Dom settled into one of the leather chairs facing Nicholas's desk. So you're not attracted to her at all? Of course not. She's... Nicholas struggled for words. Professional? Yes, but that wasn't what came to mind when he looked at Ari. Qualified? Absolutely, but that didn't explain the way his pulse quickened when she smiled. She's exactly what the girls need. And what about what you need? The question hit too close to home. Nicholas busied himself with papers, hoping Dom would drop the subject. I don't need anything except a reliable nanny who can help my daughters adjust. Nicholas. Dom's voice was gentle but firm. It's been 6 months since Sarah left. You can't keep punishing yourself forever. I'm not punishing myself. I'm focusing on what matters, building my company and taking care of my daughters. By working 18-hour days and barely spending time with them? The accusation stung because it was true. That's why I hired help. You hired help before. Remember Mrs. Patterson? She was perfectly competent, followed every rule you set, and the girls barely tolerated her. But one day with this woman and their different kids. Nicholas knew Dom was right, but admitting it felt dangerous. Ari's more intuitive than the others. Ari? Dom raised an eyebrow. First name basis already? That's what she asked the girls to call her. And what does she ask you to call her? Nicholas felt heat creep up his neck. The truth was, Ari hadn't asked him to call her anything. She'd been completely professional, addressing him as Mr. Griffin throughout the day. But when she'd introduced herself to the girls as Miss Ari, something about the nickname had lodged itself in his mind. This conversation is ridiculous, Nicholas muttered, turning back to his laptop. Dom chuckled. You know what I think? I think you're scared. Of what? Of the fact that in one day, this woman has done something you haven't been able to do in 6 months, she's made your house feel like a home again. Before Nicholas could respond, there was a soft knock on his office door. Both men turned to see Ari standing in the doorway, Sadie and Sasha flanking her like small bodyguards. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said, her voice carefully neutral. The girls wanted to say goodnight before their bath. Daddy, we made you a picture. Sadie announced, rushing forward with a piece of construction paper covered in crayon scribbles. It's our family. Sasha added proudly. That's you, and that's me and Sadie, and that's Miss Ari. Nicholas stared at the drawing, his throat tightening. In typical 5-year-old fashion, they were all stick figures with enormous smiles. But what struck him was that Ari was included, standing right next to him in the family portrait, her figure colored in with brown crayon and adorned with what looked like a yellow dress. It's beautiful, girls, he managed. Thank you. Miss Ari taught us how to make the hands hold together, Sadie explained, pointing to the connected stick hands. See? We're all holding hands like a real family. Over the twins' heads, Nicholas's eyes found Ari's. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read, something between hope and caution, as if she was seeing something in him that he wasn't sure he was ready to acknowledge. All right, ladies, she said gently. Bath time. Say goodnight to Daddy and Mr. Morris. The girls dutifully hugged Nicholas and shyly waved at Dom before following Ari out of the office. But as she reached the doorway, Ari turned back. Mr. Griffin? They'll be ready for their bedtime story in about 30 minutes, if your schedule allows. It was a simple statement, but it felt like a challenge. Nicholas glanced at his computer, where emails were piling up and spreadsheets awaited his review. Then he looked at the drawing his daughters had made, at their stick-figure family all holding hands. I'll be there, he heard himself say. Ari's smile was radiant. They'll be thrilled. After she left, Dom was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he chuckled and shook his head. What? Nicholas demanded. Nothing. Just. I don't think I've ever seen you voluntarily choose story time over spreadsheets before. Nicholas tried to focus on his work, but Dom's words echoed in his mind. The truth was, he hadn't chosen his daughters over work in months. But something about the way Ari had looked at him, the gentle challenge in her voice, had made saying yes feel like the only option. 30 minutes later, he found himself sitting on Sadie's bed with both girls tucked against his sides, their hair still damp from their bath and smelling like strawberry shampoo. Ari sat in the rocking chair nearby, watching with a soft smile as he read from their favorite book about a brave little mouse. And for the first time in 6 months, Nicholas Griffin felt like he was exactly where he belonged. Chapter 2. 2 weeks into Ari's employment, Nicholas found himself breaking his own rules. Instead of staying late at the office, he was coming home earlier, telling himself it was to check on the girls' progress. Instead of eating dinner alone in his study, he was joining them at the kitchen table, drawn by the sound of their laughter and Ari's gentle guidance. Tonight was no different. Rain drummed against the windows of his home office as he tried to focus on quarterly projections, but his attention kept drifting to the soft voices coming from the living room. Ari was helping the girls with a puzzle, her patient encouragement floating down the hallway like a siren song. "No, Sadie, turn it this way," he heard Sasha say. "That's not right either," Sadie replied, frustration creeping into her voice. "What if we try working together?" Ari suggested gently. "Sometimes 2 heads are better than 1. Sadie, you hold this piece, and Sasha, you guide it into place." It worked. It worked, both girls squealed simultaneously. Nicholas smiled despite himself. Before Ari, puzzle time had been a source of tears and tantrums. Now it was filled with cooperation and celebration. Everything was different with her here, the girls were different, the house was different, even he was different. The realization unsettled him. A soft knock on his office door interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Griffin?" He looked up to find Ari standing in the doorway, backlit by the warm light from the hallway. She'd changed from her daytime jeans into a soft burgundy sweater that hugged her curves and made her skin glow like burnished copper. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, and she looked so naturally beautiful that his breath caught in his throat. "The girls are in bed," she said, stepping into his office. "I wanted to talk to you about Sasha's progress before I head to my room." "Of course. Please, sit." He gestured to the chair across from his desk, trying to ignore the way his pulse quickened as she moved closer. Ari settled into the chair with her characteristic grace, crossing her legs and leaning forward slightly. The movement brought a hint of her perfume, something warm and floral that made him think of summer gardens and stolen moments. "Sasha's stutter has almost completely disappeared," she began, her voice warm with pride. "She's gained so much confidence in just 2 weeks. And Sadie hasn't had a nightmare since last Tuesday." Nicholas set down his pen, giving her his full attention. "That's remarkable. What did you do differently?" "I listened to them." "Really listened?" Ari's eyes were earnest, passionate about her work in a way that made something in his chest tighten. Children who've experienced abandonment often feel like their voices don't matter. When we validate their feelings and give them safe ways to express themselves, they begin to heal. There was that word again, abandonment. But this time, instead of flinching, Nicholas found himself leaning forward, drawn into her explanation. "Tell me more," he said. A soft smile played at the corners of Ari's mouth, as if his interest pleased her. "Well, Sadie's clinginess wasn't really about fear of being alone. It was about fear that if she wasn't perfect, she'd be left behind too. So I've been showing her that love isn't conditional on behavior." "And Sasha's stutter?" "Anxiety manifesting as a speech impediment. When children feel rushed or pressured to perform, sometimes their words get tangled up. I've been giving her extra time to express herself, never finishing her sentences for her." Nicholas stared at Ari, amazed by her insight. "How do you know all this?" Something flickered across her face, that same shadow of pain he'd glimpsed on her first morning. "Experience," she said simply. Both professional and personal. The rain intensified outside, pattering against the windows with increasing urgency. In the golden lamplight, Ari looked ethereal, like something from a dream he hadn't known he was having. I should let you get back to work, she said, starting to rise. Wait. The word came out more urgently than he'd intended, and she settled back into her chair, eyebrows raised in question. I wanted to thank you. For what you've done for them. They're like different children. They're the same children, Mr. Griffin. They just feel safe enough now to show you who they really are. Her words hit him like a physical blow. You think I made them feel unsafe? No, Ari said quickly, leaning forward with concern. No, that's not what I meant at all. You love them fiercely, anyone can see that. But love and emotional safety aren't always the same thing. Nicholas felt his jaw clench. Explain. Ari was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. Children need to know that their emotions are valid, even the difficult ones. When we focus only on behavior and schedules, we sometimes miss the feelings underneath. So you're saying I've been doing everything wrong? I'm saying you've been doing the best you could with the tools you had. Her voice was gentle, without a trace of judgment. But children who've lost a parent need more than structure. They need to know that the parent who stayed won't disappear if they're sad or angry or imperfect. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Nicholas stared at Ari, seeing not just his daughter's caregiver but a woman of incredible depth and wisdom. When was the last time someone had spoken to him with such honest compassion? You speak like someone who understands loss intimately, he said quietly. Ari's breath caught, and for a moment, her carefully maintained composure cracked. Nicholas saw a raw pain flash across her features before she looked away, her hands clasping tightly in her lap. We all have our stories, Mr. Griffin. Nicholas, he said without thinking. Her eyes snapped back to his, surprised. When it's just us, call me Nicholas. We've moved past formalities, don't you think? A slow blush crept up Ari's neck, and Nicholas found himself fascinated by the way color bloomed across her brown skin. She was even more beautiful when she was flustered. Nicholas, she repeated softly, and his name on her lips sounded like a prayer. The rain had settled into a steady rhythm, creating a cocoon of intimacy around them. Nicholas realized this was the longest conversation he'd had with another adult in months that wasn't about business or logistics. When was the last time he'd simply talked with someone? Really talked? Can I ask you something? He said. Ari nodded, though her posture remained slightly guarded. Why did you become a nanny? With your education and qualifications, you could have done anything. The question seemed to pain her. She was quiet for so long that Nicholas began to think she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Because children are honest. They love without conditions, trust without reservations. They don't judge you for your mistakes or make you pay for your past. She paused, her fingers twisting together. And because taking care of other people's children is easier than grieving the one you lost. The confession hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Nicholas felt his heart clench at the raw pain in her voice. Ari, he said softly, and she looked up at him with eyes bright with unshed tears. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago, she said, but her voice shook. That doesn't make it hurt less. Their eyes met and held, and something electric passed between them. Nicholas felt the air in the room shift, becoming charged with possibility and danger. He was suddenly acutely aware of everything, the way Ari's lips parted slightly as she breathed, the way the lamplight caught the gold flecks in her dark eyes, the way her presence filled his office with warmth he hadn't felt in years. I should go, Ari whispered, but she didn't move. Should you? Nicholas heard himself ask, his voice rougher than intended. The question hung in the air like a challenge. They were crossing into dangerous territory, and they both knew it. He was her employer, she was his children's caregiver, and this conversation had moved far beyond professional boundaries. But Nicholas couldn't bring himself to care. For the first time in months, he felt truly alive, sitting here in the rain-soaked darkness with this extraordinary woman who had brought light back into his world. "The girls need me to maintain appropriate boundaries," Ari said, though her voice lacked conviction. "And what do you need?" The question seemed to surprise her. She stared at him for a long moment, as if no one had asked her that in years. "I don't know," she admitted finally. "I've forgotten how to think about what I need. Maybe it's time to remember." Thunder rumbled outside, and Ari jumped slightly. Nicholas stood without thinking, moving around his desk toward her. "The storm's getting worse. Are you afraid of thunder?" "Not afraid," she said, rising to face him. "Just startled." They were standing close now, closer than employer and employee should stand. Nicholas could smell her perfume, could see the rapid flutter of her pulse at her throat. Every instinct screamed at him to step back, to maintain the professional distance that had served him well in business. Instead, he stepped closer. "Nicholas," Ari breathed, and her voice held a warning and an invitation in equal measure. "I know this is complicated," he said, his voice low and rough. "I know all the reasons why this is a terrible idea. But I can't stop thinking about you. About the way you've transformed my daughters, the way you've transformed this house. The way you've made me remember what it feels like to want something other than the next deal, the next success." Ari's breath caught, and she looked up at him with wide, vulnerable eyes. "This is dangerous. I know. I could lose my job. I would never." "It's not about you firing me," she interrupted. "It's about maintaining professional integrity. Your daughters have already been abandoned by one woman. They can't go through that again." The mention of his daughters should have been like a bucket of cold water, should have sent him retreating back behind his desk. Instead, it made him realize just how much this woman had come to mean to all of them. "You're not her," he said fiercely. "You're nothing like Sarah." Ari's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "How can you be sure?" "Because Sarah never looked at my daughters the way you do. She never listened to them, never saw them as complete people. She saw them as obligations, responsibilities that tied her down." He reached out without thinking, his fingers brushing away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "You see them as miracles." Ari closed her eyes at his touch, leaning almost imperceptibly into his hand. Her skin was soft as silk, warm as summer sunshine. "Nicholas," she whispered, and his name on her lips was the sweetest sound he'd ever heard. "I know this is crazy," he said, his thumb tracing along her cheekbone. "I know it's too fast, too complicated. But I need you to know that what I feel for you, it's not just gratitude. It's not just attraction. It's something I didn't think I was capable of feeling anymore." Her eyes opened, meeting his with an intensity that made his heart race. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that for the first time since Sarah left, I don't go to bed thinking about what went wrong. I go to bed thinking about tomorrow, about seeing you with my daughters, about the way you make our house feel like a home." The confession hung between them like a bridge they were both afraid to cross. Thunder rumbled again, closer this time, and the lights flickered momentarily. In that brief darkness, something shifted. When the light steadied, Ari had moved closer, close enough that Nicholas could feel the warmth radiating from her body. "This is insane," she whispered. "Completely insane," he agreed. "Your daughters are happier than they've been in months because of you. Your mother will disapprove. My mother disapproves of everything." Despite the tension, Ari smiled at that, and Nicholas felt his heart flip over. God, she was beautiful when she smiled, beautiful and brave and everything he hadn't known he was looking for. "What happens if this doesn't work out?" she asked, voicing the fear they were both thinking. Nicholas was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. I don't know, he admitted. But I know what happens if we don't try. We both spend the rest of our lives wondering what if. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating Ari's face in stark detail. He could see the war playing out in her expression, desire battling with caution, hope wrestling with fear. I can't promise you anything, she said finally. I'm still healing from my own losses. I don't know if I'm ready for this. I can't promise you anything either, Nicholas replied honestly. I'm new at this, the single parent thing, the opening up to someone thing. I'll probably mess it up a dozen times. So what are you suggesting? Nicholas reached out, taking her hands in his. They were soft and warm, and they fit perfectly in his palms. I'm suggesting we figure it out together. Slowly. Carefully. With the girl's well-being as our first priority. Ari stared down at their joined hands, and Nicholas held his breath, waiting for her answer. Everything hung in the balance, his growing feelings for this incredible woman, his daughter's happiness, the fragile new life they'd all begun to build together. Okay, she whispered finally. Okay? She looked up at him, and the smile that spread across her face was like sunrise after the longest night. Okay. But we take this one day at a time. No grand gestures, no rushing. Just honesty and patience and seeing where this leads. Nicholas felt something tight in his chest finally loosen. I can do honest and patient. Can you? Because you're not exactly known for your patience in business. He laughed, surprised by her teasing. You bring out a different side of me, Ari Powell. Good, she said, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Because Nicholas Griffin, the demanding perfectionist, wouldn't last 5 minutes in a relationship with me. And what about Nicholas Griffin, the man who reads bedtime stories and makes pancakes shaped like hearts? Him, she said softly, I could definitely fall for. The words hung between them, heavy with promise and possibility. Nicholas felt his heart racing as he realized that despite all his carefully constructed walls, all his fears about trust and abandonment, he was already falling. Lightning flashed again, and thunder followed immediately after. The storm was directly overhead now, wrapping around the house like a protective blanket. I should let you get some rest, Nicholas said reluctantly, though every fiber of his being wanted to keep her here, keep talking, keep existing in this bubble of intimacy they'd created. Probably, Ari agreed, but she didn't move to leave. They stood there for another moment, hands still joined, both reluctant to break the spell the storm had woven around them. Finally, Ari stepped back, and Nicholas felt the loss of her warmth like a physical ache. Good night, Nicholas, she said softly. Good night, Ari. She moved toward the door, but paused at the threshold. Nicholas? Yes? Thank you. For trusting me with your story. With your daughters. With this. After she left, Nicholas sank back into his chair, staring at the doorway she'd walked through. His hand still tingled where they'd touched hers, and his heart was racing like he'd just run a marathon. What was he doing? He was a careful man, a man who calculated risks and made strategic decisions. Getting involved with his daughter's nanny was neither careful nor strategic. It was emotional and impulsive and everything he'd sworn off after Sarah's abandonment. But as he sat there listening to the storm rage outside, Nicholas realized something that both terrified and exhilarated him. For the first time in years, he was making a decision with his heart instead of his head. And it felt absolutely right. The next morning dawned clear and bright, as if the storm had washed the world clean. Nicholas found himself hurrying through his morning routine, eager to see Ari and reassure himself that last night had been real, not just a dream born of rain and loneliness. He found her in the kitchen as usual, but something was different. There was a new softness to her smile when she looked at him, a awareness that hadn't been there before. The girls were at the table, chattering over their breakfast, blissfully unaware that the dynamic between the adults in their world had shifted. Good morning, Ari said, and her voice held a warmth that made his chest tighten. "Good morning," he replied, accepting the cup of coffee she offered. Their fingers brushed as he took the mug, and he saw her breath catch slightly at the contact. "Daddy!" Sadie called out. "Miss Ari said we can plant flowers today if it's not too muddy. The rain will have made the soil perfect for planting," Ari explained, not quite meeting his eyes. "I thought we could start a small garden." Children learn responsibility through caring for living things. Nicholas nodded, though he was barely processing her words. He was too distracted by the way the morning light caught in her hair, by the memory of how her hands had felt in his. "That sounds like a wonderful idea," he managed. The domestic scene should have felt normal, a nanny discussing the day's activities with her employer while his children ate breakfast. Instead, it felt charged with possibility, with the secret they now shared. As he prepared to leave for work, Nicholas found himself lingering by the door, reluctant to step back into his normal world of meetings and spreadsheets. "Have a good day," Ari said softly, and the simple words felt like a promise. "You too," he replied, and meant it more than he'd ever meant anything. Walking to his car, Nicholas felt like a different man than the one who'd walked this same path yesterday morning. The world looked brighter, colors more vivid, possibilities more endless. For the first time in months, Nicholas Griffin was looking forward to coming home. He had no idea that by the end of the week, their careful new beginning would be tested in ways neither of them could imagine. But for now, in the golden morning light, with the sound of his daughter's laughter floating from the kitchen window, everything felt perfectly, impossibly right. Chapter 3. Over the next 3 weeks, Nicholas and Ari fell into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Their relationship evolved slowly, carefully, like a flower opening to the sun. Stolen glances across the breakfast table. Fingers brushing as they both reached for the same book during story time. Conversations that stretched long after the girls were asleep, covering everything from childhood dreams to business strategies to the small moments that make life meaningful. Nicholas found himself rushing home from work, making excuses to cut meetings short. For the first time in his adult life, something mattered more than his empire: the sound of Ari's laughter, the way she looked at him when she thought he wasn't watching, the growing certainty that she was becoming essential to his happiness. But it was the small moments that undid him completely. Like the afternoon he came home early to find Ari curled up on the living room sofa, both girls fast asleep against her sides. She was reading quietly, one hand gently stroking Sadie's hair while Sasha clutched her other arm like a lifeline. The domestic tableau was so perfect, so right, that Nicholas had to grip the doorframe to keep from crossing the room and kissing her senseless. Or the evening when Sasha had a minor meltdown over a broken toy, and Nicholas watched Ari sink to the floor without hesitation, pulling his daughter into her arms and rocking her gently while humming a soft lullaby. The love in her eyes as she comforted his child was so fierce, so pure, that it took his breath away. "You're staring again," Ari said softly one evening as they sat on the back porch, watching the girls chase fireflies in the garden. Nicholas didn't deny it. How could he, when she was backlit by the golden sunset, her summer dress flowing around her like liquid grace? "Can you blame me?" She blushed, ducking her head in that way that never failed to make his heart skip. "The girls will notice if you're not careful." "Would that be so terrible?" Ari was quiet for a moment, watching Sadie and Sasha giggle as they tried to catch the dancing lights. "I don't want to confuse them. They've been through so much already. They love you, Ari. Anyone can see that." "I love them too," she admitted, and the simple truth of it hit Nicholas like a physical blow. "That's what scares me." Nicholas reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers on the porch swing between them. "Love doesn't have to be scary. Doesn't it?" She turned to look at him, her dark eyes filled with vulnerability. "I lost everything once, Nicholas. I don't know if I could survive losing a family again." The word family hung between them, heavy with implication. Because that's what they'd become, wasn't it? Somewhere between bedtime stories and morning pancakes, between stolen conversations and shared glances, they'd stopped being employer and employee and started being something far more precious and dangerous. "You're not going to lose us," Nicholas said fiercely. "You can't promise that. Life doesn't come with guarantees." "No," he agreed, bringing her hand to his lips and pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. "But some things are worth the risk." Ari's breath caught at the gentle contact, and Nicholas felt the familiar electricity spark between them. They'd been careful, so careful, keeping their growing feelings contained within appropriate boundaries. But the tension was building like steam in a pressure cooker, and Nicholas wasn't sure how much longer either of them could resist. "Daddy!" "Miss Ari!" Sadie came running up to the porch, her small hands cupped carefully. "Look what I caught." She opened her palms to reveal a firefly, its soft light pulsing gently. Sasha was right behind her, bouncing with excitement. "Make a wish, Daddy," Sasha commanded. "Miss Ari says fireflies carry wishes to the stars." Nicholas looked at the tiny creature in his daughter's hands, then at Ari's encouraging smile, then at both his girls' expectant faces. What could he possibly wish for that he didn't already have right here in this moment? "What did you wish for?" Ari asked softly as Sadie carefully released the firefly back into the garden. "That this moment could last forever," he said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. But even as the words left his lips, he felt a chill of premonition. In his experience, the moments that felt too perfect were usually the ones life was preparing to snatch away. He had no idea how prophetic that feeling would prove to be. The first crack in their perfect world came in the form of his mother. Abigail Griffin was a force of nature, elegant, sharp-tongued, and utterly convinced that she knew what was best for everyone around her. She'd been traveling in Europe since Sarah left, claiming she needed time to process the scandal of her son's very public divorce. But apparently, word of Nicholas's new nanny had reached her even across the Atlantic. "Nicholas, darling, I'm home." Her voice rang through the foyer like a bell, and Nicholas felt his stomach drop. He'd been in his office, sneaking glances at Ari as she helped the girls with an art project in the living room. Now he could hear the sharp click of his mother's heels on the marble floor, could practically feel the temperature in the house dropping by several degrees. "Girls, go wash your hands," Ari said quietly, her professional instincts kicking in immediately. She'd sensed the change in atmosphere as quickly as he had. "But we're not done with our paintings," Sadie protested. "We'll finish them after lunch, I promise," Ari assured her, gently ushering both twins toward the stairs. "Go on up to your bathroom, and I'll be there in just a minute." Nicholas emerged from his office just as his mother swept into the living room, her critical gaze taking in the art supplies scattered across the coffee table, the couch cushions arranged into what looked like a fort, the general air of lived-in happiness that had transformed his once pristine home. "Well," Abigail said, her tone suggesting she'd just discovered something distasteful on the bottom of her shoe. "I can see why you've been avoiding my calls." "Mother." Nicholas forced himself to remain calm, though every instinct screamed at him to protect the peaceful world Ari had created. "I wasn't expecting you." Clearly. Abigail's sharp blue eyes, so like his own, tracked the chaos with obvious disapproval. "Where are my granddaughters? And where is this nanny I've been hearing so much about?" As if summoned, Ari appeared at the top of the stairs. She'd changed from her paint-splattered t-shirt into a crisp white blouse and navy skirt, her hair pulled back in a professional bun. The transformation was remarkable, and heartbreaking. In seconds, she'd gone from the warm, laughing woman who'd been painting with his daughters to the polished, distant employee she'd been on her first day. "Mrs. Griffin," Ari said, descending the stairs with perfect composure. "I'm Ariana Powell. It's a pleasure to meet you." Abigail looked Ari up and down with the thoroughness of a general inspecting troops. Nicholas watched his mother take in every detail. Ari's natural beauty, her confident posture, the way she seemed to belong in his home despite having been there less than 2 months. Miss Powell, Abigail said coolly. I've heard quite a lot about you. All good things, I hope, Ari replied with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. That remains to be seen. The hostility in his mother's voice made Nicholas's jaw clench. Mother. Grandmother. Sadie's voice cut through the tension as both girls came racing down the stairs, their hands still damp from washing. They threw themselves at Abigail with the unconscious affection of children, seemingly oblivious to the adult undercurrents swirling around them. Hello, my darlings, Abigail said, and for a moment, her expression softened genuinely. Whatever her other faults, she did love her granddaughters. How you've grown. And what have you been doing to get so messy? We were painting. Sasha announced proudly. Miss Ari taught us how to make clouds with cotton balls. And how to mix colors to make purple. Sadie added. Want to see? We made you a picture. The girls dragged their grandmother toward the living room art station, chattering excitedly about their morning activities. Nicholas watched Abigail's face as she took in their obvious happiness, their relaxed confidence. These weren't the anxious, withdrawn children she'd seen right after Sarah left. These were thriving, joyful little girls who felt secure and loved. But instead of being pleased by the transformation, Abigail's expression grew more troubled. They seem very attached to you, she said to Ari, and somehow made it sound like an accusation. I hope so, Ari replied evenly. Attachment is healthy for children. It means they feel safe. Does it? Or does it mean they're becoming too dependent on someone who's essentially a stranger? Nicholas felt anger flare in his chest. Mother. It's all right, Nicholas, Ari said quietly, though he could see the hurt flickering in her eyes. Mrs. Griffin, I understand your concern. Children who've experienced loss can sometimes form attachments quickly as a way of protecting themselves from further abandonment. But healthy attachment isn't the same as unhealthy dependence. How convenient that you have a psychological explanation ready, Abigail said with a thin smile. Tell me, Miss Powell, what exactly are your long-term intentions here? The question hung in the air like a thrown gauntlet. Nicholas saw Ari's composure waver for just a moment, saw uncertainty flicker across her features. My intention is to provide the best possible care for Sadie and Sasha, she said carefully. And nothing more? Mother, that's enough, Nicholas said sharply. But Abigail wasn't finished. Because from what I've observed in the 10 minutes I've been here, this arrangement seems to have become rather intimate. For a professional relationship. The words hit their target with devastating accuracy. Nicholas watched color drain from Ari's face, watched her carefully constructed professional mask slip just enough to show the woman beneath, vulnerable, uncertain, and suddenly looking very young. I think there's been a misunderstanding, Ari said quietly. Has there? Abigail's voice was silk wrapped around steel. Because the way my son looks at you, the way you both look at my granddaughters, suggests this has moved far beyond a simple employment arrangement. Grandmother, are you staying for lunch? Sadie interrupted, blissfully unaware of the adult drama playing out above her head. Miss Ari makes the best grilled cheese. I'm sure she does, darling, Abigail said, her voice gentling automatically for the child. But I think Miss Powell and I need to have a private conversation first. Nicholas felt panic spike through his chest. That's not necessary. It's fine, Ari said, though her voice was slightly strained. Girls, why don't you go play in your room for a few minutes? We'll call you when lunch is ready. The twins, sensing the tension even if they didn't understand it, obediently headed upstairs. As soon as they were out of earshot, Abigail turned back to Ari with predatory focus. Let me be direct, Miss Powell. My son has made one catastrophic error in judgment when it comes to women. I won't stand by and watch him make another. Mother. Nicholas's voice was sharp with warning. No, Nicholas. This needs to be said. Abigail's gaze never left Ari's face. You're beautiful, I'll give you that. And clearly intelligent. But you're also in a position of considerable power here, caring for two vulnerable children who've already been abandoned by one maternal figure. I would never, Ari began. Wouldn't you? Tell me, Miss Powell, what happens when you decide this little domestic fantasy isn't enough anymore? When you meet someone who can offer you more than a job and a borrowed family? What happens to those little girls upstairs who've already given you their hearts? Each word was a calculated blow, designed to hit Ari's deepest fears. Nicholas watched his mother systematically dismantle the confidence and security Ari had built over the past months, watched doubt creep into her eyes like poison. I love those children, Ari said, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you? Or do you love the idea of them? The way they make you feel needed and important? Abigail's smile was razor-sharp. Because from where I stand, it looks like you've insinuated yourself into a vulnerable family and manipulated everyone's emotions for your own benefit. That's enough. Nicholas roared, his control finally snapping. You're out of line, Mother. But the damage was done. He could see it in Ari's eyes. The doubt his mother had planted was already taking root, feeding on insecurities that had never fully healed. I should check on the girls, Ari said quietly, backing toward the stairs. Ari, wait, Nicholas started after her, but his mother caught his arm. Let her go, Nicholas. You need to hear this. I don't need to hear anything except an apology to the woman he stopped abruptly, the words he'd almost said hanging in the air like a confession. Abigail's eyes sharpened. The woman you what, Nicholas? Love? After 2 months? With your children's caregiver? She shook her head sadly. You're making the same mistake again. This is nothing like Sarah. Isn't it? Another beautiful woman in a position to manipulate your feelings? Another person you're willing to trust with your children's hearts? Nicholas felt doubt creep in despite himself. Was his mother right? Was he being naive again, letting his attraction cloud his judgment? Ari is different, he said, but even to his own ears, his voice lacked conviction. Is she? Or are you so desperate to believe in happy endings that you're willing to risk your daughter's emotional well-being on a woman who could disappear from their lives as easily as she entered them? Upstairs, a door closed softly. Nicholas looked toward the sound, knowing that Ari had heard every word of this conversation. Knowing that his mother's poison had found its mark. You've destroyed everything, he said quietly. I've saved you from making another devastating mistake, Abigail replied coolly. And more importantly, I've protected my granddaughters from further heartbreak. But as Nicholas stood in his living room, surrounded by the evidence of the happy home Ari had helped him create, he wasn't sure who exactly had been saved, and who had been sacrificed. The rest of the day passed in a haze of forced normalcy. Ari emerged from the girls' room with her professional mask firmly in place, serving lunch with quiet efficiency while deflecting Sadie and Sasha's questions about why everyone seemed sad. Nicholas tried repeatedly to get her alone, to explain, to undo the damage his mother had inflicted. But Ari was a master at avoidance, always busy with the children, always just out of reach. That evening, after Abigail had finally left with promises to return soon, Nicholas found Ari in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner with mechanical precision. We need to talk, he said. I don't think that's a good idea, she replied without looking at him. Ari, please. Don't let her get in your head. You know what we have is real. She paused in her cleaning, her hands gripping the edge of the sink. Do I? Because your mother made some valid points. My mother made accusations based on fear and prejudice. Did she? Ari turned to face him, and Nicholas saw that his mother's words had done their work. The confidence, the joy, the open vulnerability that had been growing between them was gone, replaced by the careful distance of their early days. You know she did. I know that I've become too invested in this family. I know that I've crossed professional boundaries that exist for good reasons. Her voice was steady, but Nicholas could hear the pain underneath. I know that your daughters have been through enough heartbreak without adding more uncertainty to their lives. So what are you saying? Ari was quiet for a long moment, and Nicholas held his breath, praying she wouldn't say the words he could see forming behind her eyes. I'm saying maybe we need to step back. Maybe we need to remember what our priorities are supposed to be. The words hit him like a physical blow. My priority is my family. All of my family. Including you. I'm not your family, Nicholas. I'm your employee. The coldness in her voice, the way she'd retreated behind professional walls, made his chest ache. Is that really what you believe? It's what I need to believe. For everyone's sake. Nicholas stared at her, seeing the woman he'd been falling in love with disappear before his eyes. In her place stood the polished professional who'd interviewed for the job 2 months ago, competent, distant, safe. Ari. I should go, she said quietly. The girls will wonder where I am. She walked past him toward the door, and Nicholas caught her arm gently, stopping her. This isn't over, he said softly. She looked up at him, and for just a moment, he saw the real Ari behind the professional mask, hurting, conflicted, wanting to believe in them as much as he did. Maybe it should be, she whispered. Then she was gone, leaving Nicholas alone in the kitchen with the taste of impending loss bitter on his tongue. Have you ever felt torn between your heart and everyone else's expectations? Tell me about a time when love felt complicated in the comments. Over the next few days, Nicholas watched helplessly as Ari rebuilt the walls between them brick by careful brick. She was still wonderful with the girls, still the same caring, intuitive nanny they'd come to love. But with him, she maintained a professional distance that felt like ice water in his veins. The intimate conversations stopped. The shared glances disappeared. The easy warmth that had been growing between them was replaced by polite efficiency that drove him to distraction. Even worse, Sadie and Sasha sensed the change. They became clingy with Ari, as if afraid she might disappear. They asked repeatedly why everyone seemed sad, why Daddy looked angry all the time, why Miss Ari didn't smile as much anymore. You're being an idiot, Dominic told him bluntly over drinks at their usual bar. If you love her, fight for her. It's complicated, Nicholas muttered, staring into his whiskey. No, it's not. Your mother said some cruel things designed to make you both doubt what you have. The only complicated part is whether you're going to let her win. Nicholas knew Dom was right, but knowing and acting were two different things. Every time he tried to approach Ari, she found a reason to be elsewhere. Every attempt at conversation was met with professional politeness that felt like a slap in the face. But it was his daughters who finally forced the issue. 3 weeks after his mother's visit, Nicholas came home to find Ari in the living room with both girls, all 3 of them looking serious. Daddy, Sadie said solemnly, we need to have a meeting. A meeting? Nicholas sat down on the coffee table, facing them. About what? About why you and Miss Ari don't talk anymore, Sasha said with 5-year-old directness. Nicholas felt his heart clench. What do you mean, sweetheart? You used to laugh together, Sadie explained. And read stories together. And Miss Ari used to smile the happy smile, not just the nice smile. Yeah, Sasha agreed. And now everyone's sad but pretending not to be sad, and that makes us sad too. Nicholas looked at Ari, whose professional composure had cracked just enough to show the pain beneath. Girls. Are you mad at Miss Ari? Sadie asked, her small face worried. No, baby. I'm not mad at Miss Ari. Is Miss Ari mad at you? Nicholas glanced at Ari again, saw her struggling with how to answer. No, sweetheart, she said finally. I'm not mad at your daddy. Then why don't you like each other anymore? Sasha's question was heartbreakingly simple. We do like each other, Nicholas said carefully. Sometimes grown-ups have complicated feelings. But if you like each other, why can't you be friends again? Sadie's logic was irrefutable in the way that only a child's could be. Nicholas felt something shift inside him as he looked at his daughter's earnest faces, at Ari's carefully controlled expression. His mother had been wrong about so many things, but she'd been right about one: his girls had given Ari their hearts. And more importantly, she had given them hers. The question wasn't whether Ari might leave someday. The question was whether he was brave enough to build something worth staying for. "You know what?" he said, decision crystallizing in his mind. "You're absolutely right. Miss Ari and I should be friends." He stood up, extending his hand toward Ari with a small smile. "Friends?" For a moment, she just stared at his outstretched hand. Then, slowly, she reached out and took it. "Friends," she agreed softly. The girls cheered as if they'd just witnessed the most important diplomatic breakthrough in history. And maybe, Nicholas thought as Ari's fingers intertwined with his, they had. It wasn't everything they'd had before. But it was a beginning. And sometimes, beginnings were enough. Chapter 4. Their fragile truce lasted exactly 2 weeks before life decided to test them in ways neither could have imagined. It started with Maya Omar. Ari's best friend had been suspicious of Nicholas from the beginning, her detective instincts putting her on high alert whenever wealthy men seemed too good to be true. But she'd held her tongue out of respect for Ari's judgment and her friend's obvious happiness. That changed the night Ari called her in tears after Abigail's visit. "I need you to run a background check," Maya said without preamble when she arrived at Nicholas's house the following Tuesday afternoon. Ari looked up from the sandbox where she was playing with Sadie and Sasha, surprised by her friend's sudden appearance. "Maya? What are you doing here?" "Being a good friend," Maya replied grimly, her police badge glinting in the afternoon sun. "We need to talk. Privately." Something in Maya's tone made Ari's stomach clench with dread. She glanced at the girls, who were building an elaborate sand castle, completely absorbed in their play. "Girls, why don't you finish your castle while Miss Maya and I talk for just a minute?" Ari said, trying to keep her voice light. "Is she a real police officer?" Sasha whispered loudly, staring at Maya with wide eyes. "I am," Maya said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "And I solve puzzles for my job, just like you're doing with those blocks." The twins, satisfied with this explanation, returned to their construction project. Maya led Ari to the far side of the garden, out of earshot. "What did you find?" Ari asked quietly, though part of her didn't want to know. Maya pulled out a manila folder, her expression grim. "Nicholas Griffin isn't quite the grieving abandoned husband he's portrayed himself to be." Ari's heart began to race. "What do you mean?" "I mean his ex-wife didn't just leave because she couldn't handle the responsibility. She left because he had her investigated by a private firm, froze her credit cards, and threatened to destroy her reputation if she tried to take the children." The words hit Ari like physical blows. "That's not, he wouldn't. There's more." Maya opened the folder, revealing legal documents and photographs. "Sarah Griffin didn't abandon her children, Ari. She was forced out. Nicholas used his wealth and connections to make her life impossible until she had no choice but to leave." Ari stared at the documents, her hands trembling. Why would he do that? According to the court filings, she wanted a divorce and joint custody. He refused to negotiate. He wanted complete control of the children and was willing to destroy her to get it. But the girls. They don't seem traumatized by their mother leaving. They seem like she wasn't very involved. "Because he's been rewriting history," Maya said gently but firmly. "Look at these photos." Maya showed her pictures of Sarah with the twins, birthday parties, bedtime stories, playground visits. In every image, Sarah looked like a devoted mother, and Sadie and Sasha looked happy and secure in her arms. He's been systematically erasing their mother from their memories, Maya continued. Notice how there are no photos of her in the house. No mention of mommy in their conversations? That's not natural for children who lost a parent to abandonment. That's conditioning. Ari felt sick. Everything she thought she knew about Nicholas, about their situation, was crumbling around her. There's something else, Maya said quietly. Sarah Griffin isn't in California living some selfish new life. She's in a mental health facility in Oregon, being treated for severe depression and anxiety triggered by losing her children. The folder slipped from Ari's numb fingers, documents scattering in the breeze. Oh God. Ari, I'm sorry. I know you care about him. But you need to know who you're dealing with. This man destroyed his wife's life to get what he wanted. What do you think he'll do to you if you ever threaten his perfect little world? Ari wrapped her arms around herself, trying to process what she'd learned. Was everything a lie? The connection she felt with Nicholas, the love she'd seen in his eyes when he looked at his daughters, was it all manipulation? Miss Ari. Sadie's voice called out from the sandbox. Come see. We made a princess castle. Ari forced a smile, walking back to the girls on unsteady legs. It's beautiful, sweetheart. It has a tower for the princess and a moat to keep the dragons away, Sasha explained proudly. Looking at their innocent faces, Ari felt her heart breaking. These children were caught in the middle of something they didn't understand, their memories of their mother systematically erased, their reality carefully constructed by a father who might be capable of terrible things. Maya, she said quietly as her friend prepared to leave, what should I do? Protect yourself, Maya replied. And maybe try to find out the truth. The whole truth. Those little girls deserve to know their mother didn't abandon them. After Maya left, Ari moved through the rest of the day in a daze. She played with the girls, helped them with dinner, read bedtime stories, all while her mind raced with questions and doubts. When Nicholas came home from work, his usual warm smile felt different, calculated, manipulative. You're quiet tonight, he observed as they cleaned up the kitchen together. Just tired, Ari replied, not trusting herself to look at him directly. But Nicholas knew her too well. He caught her hand as she reached for a dish, his touch sending the familiar electricity through her despite everything. Ari, what's wrong? You've been different since your friend visited. His gray eyes were concerned, gentle, full of what looked like genuine care. How could someone capable of such cruelty look at her with such tenderness? I'm fine, she lied. No, you're not. Talk to me. Please. The word please almost broke her resolve. This was the Nicholas she'd fallen for, vulnerable, asking rather than demanding, treating her like an equal rather than an employee. But Maya's words echoed in her mind, this man destroyed his wife's life to get what he wanted. I should check on the girls, she said, pulling away from his touch. Nicholas let her go, but she could feel his worried gaze following her up the stairs. The storm that hit 3 days later felt like nature reflecting the turmoil in Ari's heart. It started as a summer thunderstorm, the kind that usually passed quickly. But as evening fell, it intensified into something fierce and unpredictable. Wind howled around the house, rain lashed against the windows, and lightning split the sky in brilliant, terrifying displays. The girls were restless, made anxious by the storm's fury. Nicholas was in his office, caught up in an important call with overseas clients, when the first scream shattered the night. Ari was in the twins' room in seconds, finding Sadie sitting up in bed, sobbing hysterically. The storm took Mommy away. Sadie cried, her small body shaking with terror. It's going to take us too. Sasha was awake now, reaching for her sister with frightened whimpers. I want Mommy. Where's Mommy? Ari's heart clenched. This was the first time either girl had mentioned their mother since she'd started working for the family. The storm seemed to have triggered some buried memory, some deep-seated fear that Nicholas's careful conditioning hadn't been able to erase. "Shoo, it's okay," Ari soothed, gathering both girls into her arms. "You're safe. I'm here." "But where's Mommy?" Sadie sobbed. "Daddy said she went away, but I want her back." Before Ari could respond, she heard heavy footsteps in the hallway. Nicholas appeared in the doorway, his hair disheveled, his face tight with worry. "What's wrong?" he asked, moving toward the bed. "Daddy." Sasha launched herself into his arms, and Ari watched his expression soften with love as he held his daughter. "I want Mommy," Sadie whispered against Ari's shoulder. Nicholas went completely still, his eyes meeting Ari's over Sadie's head. In that moment, she saw something flicker in his expression, guilt, fear, and something that might have been shame. "Sweetheart," Nicholas said carefully, "you know Mommy had to go away." "But why?" Sadie's question was heartbreaking in its simplicity. "Did we do something bad?" "No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong. Mommy just couldn't stay." It was the same explanation he'd always given, but tonight it felt different. Tonight, with Maya's revelations fresh in Ari's mind, it sounded like a lie. Thunder crashed overhead, and the lights flickered ominously. "I'm scared," Sasha whimpered. "How about we all go downstairs?" Ari suggested. "We can make hot chocolate and wait out the storm together." They'd barely made it to the living room when the power went out, plunging the house into darkness. The girls shrieked, clinging to the adults as lightning provided the only illumination. "It's okay," Nicholas said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "I'll get some candles." 20 minutes later, they were settled in the living room, surrounded by flickering candlelight that cast dancing shadows on the walls. The girls had calmed down, curled up on either side of Ari on the couch, while Nicholas sat in the chair across from them. The storm raged outside, but inside the circle of candlelight, there was a strange intimacy. The darkness seemed to strip away pretenses, leaving them vulnerable and honest in ways that daylight didn't allow. "Tell us a story, Miss Ari," Sadie requested, her voice still shaky from her earlier tears. "What kind of story would you like?" "A happy one," Sasha said firmly. "With a mommy who doesn't go away." The innocent request hit both adults like a lightning bolt. Ari felt tears prick her eyes, while Nicholas looked like he'd been physically struck. "Once upon a time," Ari began softly, "there was a beautiful queen who loved her two little princesses more than anything in the whole world." "Did she live with them?" Sadie asked hopefully. Ari glanced at Nicholas, seeing the warning in his eyes. But something in her rebelled against continuing his lies. "She wanted to," Ari said carefully. "But sometimes, grown-ups make things complicated for each other." "Why?" Sasha asked. "Because sometimes people forget that love is more important than being right," Ari replied, her eyes still locked with Nicholas's. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with double meaning. Nicholas's jaw clenched, but he didn't interrupt. "What happened to the queen?" Sadie pressed. "She had to go away for a while. But she never stopped loving her princesses. She thought about them every single day and wished she could be with them." "Did the princesses remember her?" Sasha's question was barely a whisper. Deep in their hearts, they did. Love like that never really goes away, even when people can't be together. Both girls had gone quiet, processing the story. After a few minutes, their breathing deepened into sleep, exhausted by the emotional upheaval of the evening. Nicholas stood carefully, lifting Sasha into his arms while Ari took Sadie. They carried the girls upstairs by candlelight, tucking them into bed with gentle kisses and whispered reassurances. But as they descended the stairs, the fragile peace shattered. "What the hell was that?" Nicholas demanded, his voice low but furious. "What was what?" Ari replied, though she knew exactly what he meant. "That story. You were practically telling them their mother is some tragic victim waiting to come back." wasn't she? The question stopped Nicholas cold. In the flickering candlelight, his face looked haggard, older than his 34 years. You don't know what you're talking about, he said finally. Don't I? Ari set down the candle she'd been carrying, her hands shaking with emotion. I know that Sarah Griffin didn't abandon her children. I know that she was forced out by a husband who couldn't stand to lose control. Nicholas went very still. Who told you that? Does it matter? The question is whether it's true. It's not that simple. Isn't it? Ari's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. Did you have your wife investigated? Did you freeze her access to money? Did you threaten to destroy her if she didn't give up custody? She was going to take my daughters away from me. The words exploded out of Nicholas like a dam bursting. She wanted to move across the country, limit my access to them. I couldn't let that happen. So you made sure she couldn't take them by making it impossible for her to stay? I protected my children from an unstable mother who would have used them as weapons in a custody battle. Unstable? Ari stared at him in disbelief. She's in a mental health facility because of what you did to her. She's in a mental health facility because she couldn't handle losing a fight she started. The coldness in his voice, the complete lack of empathy for the woman who'd borne his children, chilled Ari to the bone. This was the man Maya had warned her about. Ruthless, controlling, willing to destroy anyone who threatened his version of reality. My God, she whispered. You really don't see it, do you? You've convinced yourself that you're the victim here. I am the victim. Sarah left me, abandoned her responsibilities, and forced me to rebuild my daughters' lives from scratch. Sarah left because you gave her no choice. And those girls upstairs are victims too, of a father who systematically erased their mother from their lives to protect his own ego. I was protecting them from the pain of abandonment. No, you were protecting yourself from admitting that you drove their mother away. Ari's professional composure finally shattered completely. Do you have any idea what you've done? Those children blame themselves for their mother leaving. They think they weren't good enough, weren't lovable enough to make her stay. That's not. It is exactly what's happening. I see it every day. The way Sadie tries so hard to be perfect, the way Sasha shuts down when she's scared. They're terrified that if they're not good enough, everyone they love will leave them. Nicholas looked like she'd slapped him. I would never leave them. Wouldn't you? What happens when they get older and start asking harder questions about their mother? What happens when they want to know the truth about why she really left? Will you manipulate and control them the way you did her? I have never manipulated my daughters. Haven't you? Then why don't they have any pictures of their mother? Why don't they talk about her except in moments of terror? Why do they flinch when they accidentally mention missing her? Each accusation hit its mark, and Ari watched Nicholas's face cycle through anger, denial, and finally, devastating recognition. I was protecting them, he said, but his voice lacked conviction now. You were protecting yourself. And in the process, you've damaged them in ways you're only beginning to understand. Thunder crashed overhead, so loud it seemed to shake the house. In the flash of lightning that followed, Ari saw tears on Nicholas's cheeks. What do you want me to do? He asked, his voice broken. Bring their unstable mother back into their lives? Shatter the security they've finally found? I want you to stop lying to them. I want you to stop lying to yourself. And I want you to get help, for them and for you. From who? A therapist who'll tell me I'm a terrible father? From someone who can help you understand that love isn't about control. That being a good parent means putting your children's needs before your own fears. Nicholas was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flickering candlelight. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. I can't lose them, Ari. They're all I have left. The vulnerability in his confession broke her heart even as his actions appalled her. This was the Nicholas she'd fallen in love with, the wounded man beneath the controlling exterior, the father who loved his children but didn't know how to show it without smothering them. "You won't lose them," she said softly. "But you might lose who they really are if you keep trying to control their reality." "And what about us?" he asked, looking up at her with desperate eyes. "Where does this leave us?" The question she'd been dreading hung between them like a blade. Because despite everything, despite the lies and manipulation and devastating revelations, she still loved him. She loved the man who read bedtime stories and made pancakes shaped like hearts. She loved the father who held his daughters through nightmares and worried about their happiness. But she also saw clearly now the man who'd been willing to destroy his wife to get what he wanted. The man who'd been carefully controlling everyone around him, including her. "I don't know," she admitted. "I don't know how to reconcile the man I've fallen in love with and the man who could do what you did to Sarah. They're the same person, Ari. I'm not perfect. I made mistakes. But everything I did was out of love for my daughters. Love doesn't justify cruelty, Nicholas. And it doesn't justify lies." The storm was beginning to weaken outside, the thunder growing more distant. But inside the house, the emotional tempest was just reaching its peak. "So what are you saying?" Nicholas asked. "That you can't love someone who's made terrible mistakes?" "I'm saying I can't enable someone who refuses to acknowledge those mistakes or work to make them right." "What do you want me to do? Grovel? Beg Sarah's forgiveness? Tear apart my daughters' lives to appease your sense of justice?" The defensive anger was back in his voice, and Ari realized that he still didn't truly understand what he'd done wrong. He saw Sarah as an obstacle he'd overcome, not a person he'd destroyed. He saw his daughter's conditioning as protection, not damage. "I want you to tell your daughters the truth about their mother. I want you to get them into therapy to help them process what they've been through. And I want you to figure out how to co-parent with Sarah if she's well enough, or at least how to honor her memory in their lives. And if I can't do that?" Ari's heart broke as she realized what her answer had to be. "Then I can't stay." The words hit Nicholas like a physical blow. "You're giving me an ultimatum? I'm telling you what I need to see to believe that you're the man I thought you were. The man I could build a life with. So you'll abandon my daughters just like their mother did?" The accusation was a calculated blow, designed to hurt her in the place she was most vulnerable. And it worked. Ari felt the words hit like daggers, targeting every fear she had about not being good enough, about causing pain to children she loved. But this time, she didn't retreat. "No," she said firmly. "I won't abandon them. But I won't enable their father's lies either. Those girls deserve better than a reality built on manipulation and control. They deserve stability. They deserve a father who protects them from pain. They deserve the truth. They deserve to know that their mother loved them, that her leaving wasn't their fault, that love doesn't have to be earned through perfect behavior." "And what about your truth, Ari?" Nicholas's voice turned cold, calculating. "Should I tell them about the nanny who made them love her and then walked away when things got complicated? Should I explain how another woman they trusted decided they weren't worth fighting for?" The cruelty in his voice, the way he was willing to use her love for the children as a weapon against her, showed Ari everything she needed to know. This was who Nicholas Griffin really was when threatened, a man who would destroy anyone who challenged his control. "You're right," she said quietly. "They don't deserve to be hurt by another adult who makes promises she can't keep. Ari. I'll stay until you find a replacement. But after that..." She couldn't finish the sentence. "After that, you'll walk away from us. From everything we've built together. After that, I'll do what I should have done from the beginning, I'll protect myself from a man who sees love as possession and people as things to be controlled." The power chose that moment to flicker back on, harsh electric light flooding the room and washing out the intimate candlelight. In the sudden brightness, they could see each other clearly, Nicholas with tears on his cheeks and fury in his eyes, Ari with her heart breaking but her resolve intact. "Fine," Nicholas said, his voice flat with defeat and anger. "Leave. But don't pretend this is about my daughters or some noble moral stand. This is about you being too scared to fight for what we have. What we have is built on lies and manipulation. I won't be another person you control to get what you want. I never tried to control you. Didn't you? The perfect job, the perfect home, the perfect family for me to fall in love with? Did it ever occur to you that I might have needs and dreams beyond being your daughter's surrogate mother and your convenient romance?" Nicholas stared at her, and she saw the exact moment he realized she was right. That somewhere along the way, he'd started seeing her as another piece of his carefully constructed world rather than as an independent person with her own agency. "I love you," he said desperately. "That has to count for something. Love without respect isn't love, Nicholas. It's possession. And I won't be possessed, no matter how golden the cage." She turned to go, but his voice stopped her. "If you leave, don't come back. I won't put my daughters through that kind of confusion again." Ari turned back to look at him one last time, memorizing his face even as her heart shattered. "Goodbye, Nicholas." As she walked up the stairs to pack her things, she heard him sink into his chair with a sound like a man who'd lost everything that mattered. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving only the gentle sound of rain against the windows and the echo of dreams that would never come true. In 3 hours, Ariana Powell would walk out of the Griffin house forever, leaving behind the only family she'd known since losing her own child 5 years ago. And Nicholas Griffin would be left to explain to his daughters why another woman they loved had disappeared from their lives. Neither of them knew that the real storm was just beginning. Chapter 5. And so we return to where our story began, Nicholas Griffin standing in his empty foyer, a multi-millionaire who had everything money could buy, yet felt like the poorest man alive. 3 days had passed since Ari walked out his front door in tears, and his 5-year-old daughters hadn't eaten a proper meal since. The first morning without her, Nicholas had tried to maintain normalcy. He'd attempted to make breakfast, burning the pancakes and setting off the smoke alarm. He'd tried to brush Sadie's hair, leaving her in tears from his clumsy attempts. He'd tried to read the bedtime story routine, but his voice lacked the warmth and magic that Ari had brought to every word. By the second day, the girls had stopped pretending everything was normal. "Where's Miss Ari?" Sasha asked at breakfast, pushing away the bowl of cereal Nicholas had placed in front of her. "She had to go away, sweetheart," Nicholas said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "When is she coming back?" Sadie's small voice was full of hope that broke his heart. "I don't know if she is, baby." Both girls stared at him with identical expressions of devastation. Then Sasha began to cry, not the loud, demanding tears of a tantrum, but the quiet, heartbroken sobs of a child who'd lost someone precious. "Did we do something bad?" Sadie whispered, echoing the same question she'd asked about her mother. "No, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong." But even as he said the words, Nicholas knew his daughters didn't believe him. How could they? In their short lives, 2 women they'd loved had disappeared without explanation. What else could they think except that they were somehow not worth staying for? By the 3rd day, neither girl would eat more than a few bites of anything. They sat at meals staring at their plates with listless eyes, asking repeatedly when Miss Ari would come home. They refused to play in the garden she'd helped them plant, wouldn't touch the art supplies she'd used to create magic with them, wouldn't even look at the books she'd read to them with such animated voices. Nicholas had tried everything, bribes, distractions, even threats. Nothing worked. His daughters were grieving, and he was helpless to comfort them because he was grieving too. The breaking point came when Georgia Williams arrived for her weekly cleaning and found the 3 of them in various states of despair. Georgia had worked for the Griffin family for 15 years. She'd been there when Nicholas and Sarah were newlyweds, had helped care for the twins when they were babies, had watched the marriage crumble and the family fracture. More importantly, she'd seen the transformation that Ari had brought to the house. And now she could see the devastation her absence had left behind. "Mr. Nicholas," she said, finding him in his office staring blankly at his computer screen while the sounds of children crying drifted from upstairs. "We need to talk." Nicholas looked up, and Georgia was shocked by his appearance. In 3 days, he'd aged years. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair disheveled, his usually pristine appearance rumpled and careless. "Not now, Georgia. I have calls to make. I need to find a new nanny. You need to get Miss Ariana back." The blunt statement stopped Nicholas cold. "That's not possible." "Why? Because you're too proud to admit you made a mistake?" Nicholas's jaw clenched. "You don't understand the situation. I understand that those little girls upstairs are heartbroken. I understand that you look like a man who's lost everything that matters. And I understand that Miss Ariana was the best thing that happened to this family since those babies were born. It's complicated." "No, it's not complicated. It's simple. You love her, she loves you, and those children love her like a mother. The only complicated part is your stubborn pride." Nicholas stood abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the garden where Ari used to play with the girls. "She left, Georgia. She chose to walk away." "Did she? Or did you push her away because you were scared?" The question hit too close to home. "I don't know what you're talking about." Georgia had known Nicholas since he was younger than his daughters were now. She'd watched him build walls around his heart after every disappointment, every betrayal. She'd seen him retreat into control and perfectionism as a way to protect himself from being hurt. "Mr. Nicholas, you sit down and listen to me," she said in the tone that had made him obey her as a child. "I was here when Miss Sarah left. I saw what that did to you and those babies. But I also saw what Miss Ariana did for all of you." Nicholas sank into his chair, suddenly exhausted. "She brought life back to this house," Georgia continued. "She made those girls laugh again. She made them feel safe and loved. And she made you remember what it felt like to be happy. And then she left when things got difficult. Or maybe she left because you made it impossible for her to stay." Nicholas looked up sharply. "What's that supposed to mean?" "I've worked for this family long enough to know your patterns, Mr. Nicholas. When someone gets too close, when you start caring too much, you find a way to push them away before they can hurt you. You did it with Miss Sarah, and now you've done it with Miss Ariana. Sarah and I had real problems. You had problems because you tried to control everything instead of working together. And from what I can see, you did the same thing with Miss Ariana." The accusation stung because it held too much truth. "I was trying to protect my daughters." "From what?" "From being loved by a woman who would have given her life for them. From being abandoned again. The only person who abandoned them was you." Georgia's voice rose with decades of suppressed frustration. "You abandoned them emotionally when their mother left. You hid behind work and schedules and rules instead of helping them heal. Miss Ariana was trying to undo that damage, and you punished her for it." Nicholas felt tears burning behind his eyes. "I don't know how to do this, Georgia. I don't know how to be the father they need. But Miss Ariana did. And instead of learning from her, instead of building something beautiful together, you drove her away because you were scared of losing control. What if I'm just like my father?" Nicholas whispered, voicing his deepest fear. "What if I'm destined to hurt everyone I love?" Georgia's expression softened. She remembered Nicholas's father, cold, controlling, emotionally distant. She'd watched young Nicholas swear he'd never be like that, and she'd watched him slowly become exactly what he'd feared. "You're not your father, Mr. Nicholas. But you're choosing to act like him. Your father never fought for love, never admitted when he was wrong, never put anyone else's needs before his own pride. It's too late. I said terrible things to her. She won't forgive me. Have you asked her to? The question hung in the air. Nicholas realized that he hadn't even tried to contact Ari since she left. He'd been too proud, too hurt, too convinced that her leaving proved she didn't really love them. She made her choice, he said weakly. She made the only choice you gave her. But choices can be unmade if someone's brave enough to fight for what matters. From upstairs came the sound of renewed crying. Sadie's voice, calling for Miss Ari in a heartbroken wail that cut through Nicholas like a knife. Those babies are suffering, Georgia said quietly. And so are you. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Nicholas closed his eyes, listening to his daughter's pain. In 3 days, he'd watched them withdraw into themselves, watched the light go out of their eyes, watched them begin to believe that love was something that disappeared without warning. He was doing to them exactly what had been done to him as a child, teaching them that people leave, that love is conditional, that the safest course is not to care too deeply about anyone. What would you do? He asked Georgia. I'd swallow my pride, get in my car, and go get the woman who made this family whole. And if she won't come back? Then at least you'll know you tried. At least your daughters will know their father fought for love instead of just letting it slip away. Georgia left him alone with his thoughts and the sound of his children crying. Nicholas sat in his office, staring at his phone, knowing he should call Ari but terrified of what she might say. Instead, he did something he hadn't done in years. He went upstairs to comfort his daughters. He found them in Sadie's room, curled up together on the bed, clutching the stuffed animals Ari had bought them. Their faces were red and swollen from crying, their small bodies shaking with grief they couldn't understand. Daddy, Sasha said when she saw him, my tummy hurts because Miss Ari went away. Nicholas sat on the bed and gathered both girls into his arms, feeling his heart break at their pain. I know, baby. Daddy's tummy hurts too. Why did she leave us? Sadie asked, her voice muffled against his chest. For the first time in their lives, Nicholas decided to tell his daughters the complete truth. Because Daddy made a mistake, he said quietly. Daddy said things that hurt her feelings, and she left because she was sad. But we didn't want her to go, Sasha protested. I know, sweetheart. But sometimes grown-ups make bad choices that hurt people they love. Like when Mommy went away? Sadie asked. The question stopped Nicholas cold. Here it was, the conversation he'd been avoiding for months, the truth he'd been too scared to face. Yes, he said finally. Like when Mommy went away. Did Mommy leave because we were bad? Sasha's question was barely audible. No, baby. Mommy left because Daddy and Mommy couldn't agree on things, and Daddy made it hard for her to stay. It was never, ever because of you. Both girls looked up at him with wide eyes. This was the first time he'd ever admitted that their mother's leaving wasn't entirely her choice. Does Mommy still love us? Sadie asked. Nicholas felt tears spill over as he realized how much damage his silence had done. Yes, sweetheart. Mommy loves you very much. She thinks about you every day. Then why can't she come home? Because sometimes grown-ups hurt each other so badly that they can't live together anymore. But that doesn't mean the love goes away. Do you think Miss Ari still loves us? Sasha asked hopefully. I know she does. Miss Ari loves you more than anything in the world. Then why can't she come home too? The innocent question hit Nicholas like a lightning bolt. Why couldn't she come home? Because he was too proud to apologize? Because he was too scared to admit he'd been wrong? Because he'd rather let his daughters suffer than risk being vulnerable? Maybe she can, he said softly. Maybe if Daddy says he's sorry and promises to do better, maybe Miss Ari will come home. Will you ask her? Sadie's eyes were bright with hope. Would you like me to? Yes, both girls said simultaneously. But first, Daddy needs to tell you some things about Mommy. Important things that you deserve to know. For the next hour, Nicholas told his daughters about their mother, not the sanitized version he'd been feeding them, but the truth. He told them about the bedtime stories Sarah used to read, the songs she sang, the way she used to dance with them in the kitchen. He told them that their parents' divorce wasn't their fault, that sometimes adults make mistakes that hurt people they love. He pulled out photo albums that had been hidden away, showing them pictures of happier times when they were a complete family. He watched their faces light up as memories began to surface, fragments of love they'd been made to forget. "Can we call Mommy?" Sadie asked after seeing a picture of Sarah pushing her on a swing. "Someday, when she's feeling better," Nicholas promised. "But first, let's see if we can get Miss Ari to come home." Both girls nodded eagerly, and for the first time in 3 days, they smiled. Nicholas tucked them into bed with promises that tomorrow would be different, that he would find a way to make things right. Then he went downstairs and sat in his living room, surrounded by evidence of the life Ari had helped them build. Her coffee mug was still in the sink. Her bookmark was still in the novel she'd been reading. Her sweater was draped over the back of the couch where she'd left it the night of their fight. The house felt like a museum of happiness, every corner holding memories of laughter and warmth and love. Without Ari, it was just a house again, beautiful but empty, perfect but lifeless. Nicholas pulled out his phone and scrolled to Ari's number. His thumb hovered over the call button for long minutes as he tried to find the courage to face his mistakes. Finally, he dialed. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Nicholas held his breath, praying she would answer, terrified of what he would say if she did. "Hello?" Her voice was quiet, cautious, but hearing it made his heart race. "Ari," he said, and her name came out rough with emotion. "It's Nicholas." There was a long pause. "I know. What do you want?" "I want to apologize. I want to beg your forgiveness. I want to ask you to come home." Another pause, longer this time. "Nicholas. Please, just listen. I know I hurt you. I know I said terrible things. I know I was wrong about everything, about Sarah, about you, about what my daughters need. It's not that simple. I told them the truth tonight. About their mother, about why she really left. I showed them pictures, told them stories, helped them remember that she loved them." He heard Ari's sharp intake of breath. How did they react? They cried. They asked if they could call her. They asked why I hadn't told them before. His voice broke. They asked if you still loved them. Of course I love them. I will always love them. Then come home. Please, Ari. We need you. I need you. Nicholas, what we had was based on lies. No, what we had was real. The lies were everything around it, but what we felt, what we built together, that was real. And I'm asking you to help me build something true this time. Ari was quiet for so long that Nicholas wondered if she'd hung up. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with tears. I can't go through this again. I can't love you and those girls and lose you again. My heart won't survive it. You won't lose us. I swear to you, Ari, I'll do whatever it takes. Therapy, co-parenting with Sarah if she's able, complete honesty with the girls, whatever you need to see that I've changed. How do I know you mean it? How do I know this isn't just desperation talking? Nicholas looked around the empty living room, thinking of his daughters upstairs, probably lying awake listening for the sound of Ari's voice in the hallway. Because I'm tired of being afraid, he said simply. I'm tired of pushing away the people I love because I'm scared they'll leave anyway. I'm tired of my daughters thinking love is something that disappears without warning. I want to be the man you thought I was, Ari. I want to be the father my girls deserve. But I can't do it without you. Nicholas. I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I've done things that can't be undone. But I'm asking anyway, because you taught me that love is worth fighting for, even when you're scared, even when you might fail. There was a long silence, and Nicholas could hear the sound of his own heartbeat in his ears. The girls, Ari said finally. Are they okay? No. They haven't eaten properly in 3 days. They keep asking when you're coming home. They're grieving, Ari, and I don't know how to help them because I'm grieving too. Another pause. Then, I'll come see them. Not to stay, just to explain. They deserve that much. When? Tomorrow. After school would have ended if they were in school. Thank you, Nicholas whispered, feeling hope bloom in his chest for the first time in days. This doesn't fix everything, Nicholas. We still have a lot to work through. I know. But it's a start. After she hung up, Nicholas sat in the quiet living room and wept, for the pain he'd caused, for the time they'd lost, for the fragile hope that tomorrow might bring healing. Upstairs, unbeknownst to him, 2 little girls had crept out of their beds to listen at the top of the stairs. They'd heard their father's side of the conversation, heard the desperation and love in his voice as he'd begged Miss Ari to come home. Sadie and Sasha looked at each other with wide eyes, then smiled for the first time in 3 days. Maybe tomorrow their family would be whole again. The next afternoon, Nicholas paced the living room like a caged animal while Sadie and Sasha sat by the window, watching for Ari's car. They'd spent the morning asking endless questions about when she would arrive, what she would say, whether she would stay for dinner. Nicholas had no answers. He only knew that seeing her again would either save his heart or break it completely. When the doorbell rang at exactly 3 o'clock, both girls shrieked with excitement and raced for the front door. Nicholas followed more slowly, his heart hammering against his ribs. He opened the door to find Ari standing on his front porch, looking beautiful and nervous and achingly familiar. She dressed carefully, a soft blue dress that brought out her eyes, her hair loose around her shoulders, just enough makeup to hide the evidence of sleepless nights. Miss Ari. Sadie launched herself forward, wrapping her arms around Ari's waist with desperate affection. You came back. Sasha was right behind her sister, and suddenly Ari was kneeling on the porch, holding both girls as they cried happy tears into her shoulders. I missed you so much, she whispered, her own voice thick with emotion. We missed you too, Sadie said. We didn't eat because you weren't here to make it taste good. And Daddy cried, Sasha added with 5-year-old honesty. Over the girls' heads, Ari's eyes met Nicholas's. He nodded, not ashamed to admit his pain. Why don't we go inside, he suggested gently. They settled in the living room, the girls flanking Ari on the couch while Nicholas took the chair across from them. For a moment, it felt like old times, a family gathered together, comfortable and complete. I need to explain something to you both, Ari began carefully. About why I went away. Daddy told us, Sadie said solemnly. He said he made a mistake and hurt your feelings. That's right. Sometimes grown-ups disagree about important things, and sometimes those disagreements hurt people's feelings. But you still love us, right? Sasha asked anxiously. Oh, sweetheart, I love you more than all the stars in the sky. That will never, ever change. Then why can't you stay? Sadie's question was heartbreakingly simple. Ari glanced at Nicholas, seeing the hope and fear warring in his expression. Because staying means your daddy and I have to learn how to disagree without hurting each other. We have to learn how to talk about difficult things. We have to make sure we're doing what's best for you, not just what's easiest for us. We can help, Sasha offered earnestly. We're good at talking about feelings now. Daddy taught us. Despite everything, Ari smiled. You are very good at talking about feelings. But this is grown-up stuff that your daddy and I have to figure out. Are you going to figure it out here? Sadie asked hopefully. I don't know yet, baby. But I promise you that whatever happens, it won't be because you did anything wrong. And it won't mean I stop loving you. Nicholas watched Ari comfort his daughters with the same gentle wisdom she'd always shown, and felt his heart swell with love and gratitude. Even now, even after everything he'd done, she was putting their needs first. "Girls," he said gently, "why don't you go play in your room for a little while? Miss Ari and I need to have a grown-up conversation." "About staying?" Sasha asked hopefully. "About everything," Nicholas replied honestly. The girls hugged Ari one more time before reluctantly heading upstairs. As soon as they were gone, the easy warmth between the adults evaporated, replaced by awkward tension. "They look thin," Ari said, breaking the silence. "They haven't eaten much since you left. I tried everything, but nothing worked." They were punishing themselves. Children often do that when they think they've caused someone to leave. The observation hit Nicholas like a physical blow. "God, I've messed everything up, haven't I?" "Not everything," Ari said softly. "The conversation you had with them about their mother, that was brave. That was what they needed. I should have done it months ago." "Yes, you should have. But you did it now, and that matters." They sat in silence for a moment, both remembering happier times in this same room. "I've been thinking about what you said," Nicholas began. "About Sarah, about the girls, about everything. And you were right. About all of it. I did manipulate the situation with Sarah. I did prioritize my fear over my daughter's emotional needs. I did try to control you instead of trusting you." Ari nodded, waiting for him to continue. "I called Sarah's treatment facility yesterday. I spoke to her therapist, with Sarah's permission. She's doing better. She's been clean from the medications she was abusing for 4 months now. And she wants to see the girls." Ari's eyes widened with surprise. "How do you feel about that?" "Terrified," Nicholas admitted. "But also, hopeful. The girls deserve to know their mother. And Sarah deserves a chance to rebuild her relationship with them, if she's healthy enough. That's a big step. It's the right step. One of many I need to take." Nicholas took a deep breath, preparing to bare his soul completely. "I've made an appointment with a therapist, for me, and family sessions for all of us. I want to understand why I do the things I do, how to be a better father, a better partner. I want to learn how to love without controlling." "Nicholas. I'm not done," he said gently. "I also called a lawyer. I'm going to work out a visitation arrangement with Sarah, assuming her doctors think she's ready. I'm going to make sure the girls have access to their mother, and I'm going to support that relationship instead of sabotaging it." Ari stared at him, clearly struggling to process this transformation. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why now, when it might be too late for us? Because even if you never forgive me, even if you never come back, my daughters deserve a father who puts their needs first. And because you were right, love isn't about possession. It's about wanting what's best for someone, even when it's hard, even when it scares you." Tears spilled down Ari's cheeks. "You have no idea how much I wanted to hear you say that. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I've damaged things between us in ways that might be irreparable. But I'm asking anyway, because I love you, Ari. Not because you take care of my daughters, not because you make my house feel like a home, but because you challenge me to be better than I am. Because you see the man I could be and believe I'm worth the effort it takes to become him." "I do love you," she whispered. "That's never been the question." "Then what is the question?" "The question is whether we can build something real together. Something based on honesty and trust and mutual respect, not just love and attraction." Nicholas leaned forward, his eyes intense with sincerity. "I want to try. I want to do this right, Ari. I want to court you properly, earn your trust back, prove that I can be the partner you deserve. It won't be easy. There will be setbacks. I have my own issues to work through, fear of abandonment, trust problems, the grief I never fully processed over losing my own child. We'll work through it together. With help, with patience, with complete honesty. Ari was quiet for a long moment, and Nicholas held his breath, waiting for her answer. I have conditions, she said finally. Anything. Family therapy, as you mentioned. Regular sessions, all of us together and separately as needed. I want professional help navigating this. Done. Complete transparency about Sarah and the custody arrangement. I won't be kept in the dark about decisions that affect the girls. Agreed. And we take this slowly. No rushing into anything, no assumptions about the future. We rebuild trust one day at a time. Whatever you need. Ari looked toward the stairs, where the sound of the girls playing drifted down to them. And we prioritize their emotional well-being above everything else. If at any point this arrangement is hurting them, we stop. Of course. She turned back to him, and Nicholas saw hope beginning to bloom in her eyes. Okay. Okay. Okay, I'll come home. I'll try again. But this is our last chance, Nicholas. If you revert to controlling behavior, if you lie to me or manipulate situations to get your way, I'm gone for good. Nicholas felt tears of relief and gratitude spill down his cheeks. Thank you. You won't regret this, I promise. I hope not. Because those little girls upstairs have already lost one mother figure. They can't lose another. Before Nicholas could respond, they heard footsteps thundering down the stairs. Sadie and Sasha appeared in the doorway, their faces anxious and hopeful. Are you done with the grown-up talking? Sasha asked. For now, Ari said with a smile. Are you staying for dinner? Sadie added hopefully. Ari looked at Nicholas, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, she said. I'm staying for dinner. Forever? Sasha pressed. We're going to take it one day at a time, Ari replied. But yes, I think I'm staying. The girls erupted in cheers, rushing forward to wrap their arms around both adults. And for the first time in days, the Griffin house felt like home again. 6 months later, Nicholas Griffin stood in his kitchen making pancakes shaped like hearts while his daughters chattered at the breakfast table and Ariana Powell hummed softly as she packed their lunchboxes. It hadn't been easy. There had been therapy sessions that left them all emotionally drained, difficult conversations about trust and boundaries, moments when old patterns tried to reassert themselves. But they'd worked through each challenge together, with honesty and patience and professional help. Sarah had started supervised visits with the girls 2 months ago. It had been awkward and emotional for everyone, but the twins were slowly rebuilding their relationship with their mother. Nicholas had learned to support these visits, recognizing that his daughters were happier and more secure knowing their mother loved them. More importantly, he'd learned to love without controlling, to trust without demanding guarantees, to be vulnerable without losing himself. Daddy, Sadie said, interrupting his thoughts, Miss Ari says you have something special to ask us. Nicholas glanced at Ari, who was trying to hide a smile. Last night, he'd asked her to marry him, properly this time, with a ring and a proposal that acknowledged everything they'd been through. She'd said yes, but only if the girls approved. I do have something special to ask, he said, kneeling down between their chairs. How would you feel if Miss Ari became part of our family forever? If she became your stepmother? Sasha's eyes went wide. Does that mean she can't leave anymore? It means we're all choosing to be a family together. Forever, Ari explained gently. And you won't go away like Mommy did? Sadie asked. Mommy didn't go away because she stopped loving you, Nicholas said carefully. Mommy and Daddy made mistakes that hurt everyone. But Miss Ari and I have learned from those mistakes. We're going to take better care of each other and of you. So you want to marry Miss Ari? Sasha asked with 5-year-old directness. Very much. But only if you think it's a good idea. Both girls looked at each other, having one of those silent twin conversations. Then they turned back to their father with identical grins. Yes, they shouted simultaneously. Can we help plan the wedding? As Nicholas pulled his daughters and his fiancée into a group hug, he marveled at the journey that had brought them here. A year ago, he'd been a broken man raising broken children in a house that felt like a beautiful prison. Now he was surrounded by love, laughter, and the promise of a future built on truth instead of fear. Love sometimes means risking everything for someone who's worth everything. Have you ever taken that leap of faith? What happened when you chose love over fear? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. The story of Nicholas and Ariana reminds us that real love isn't about possession or control. It's about growth, forgiveness, and the courage to be vulnerable with someone who sees your flaws and loves you anyway. It's about putting the needs of those you love above your own fears, and believing that people can change when they're motivated by genuine love. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories are the ones that almost don't happen, the ones that require us to fight our own worst instincts and become better versions of ourselves. Sometimes love means losing everything you thought you wanted to gain everything you never knew you needed. For Nicholas, Ariana, Sadie, and Sasha, their story was just beginning. There would be more challenges ahead, integrating Sarah back into the girls' lives, navigating the complexities of a blended family, learning to trust completely after being hurt so deeply. But they would face those challenges together, with honesty and patience and the unshakable belief that love, when it's real and true and fought for, can overcome anything. If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to hear that love is always worth fighting for, even when the odds seem impossible. And if you have your own story about choosing love over fear, about second chances and forgiveness, I'd love to hear it in the comments below. Remember, tomorrow brings a new story to our Dear Love Diaries family, another tale of hearts that find their way to each other against all odds. Until then, keep believing in the power of love to transform lives, heal wounds, and create families in the most unexpected ways. The best love stories aren't fairy tales, they're stories of real people who choose each other, again and again, through every storm life throws their way. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, we get to live one of those stories ourselves.